That's the sound of the coffee pouring. Welcome back. Well, or for the first time, really, welcome to the Doctor's Brew UK. As it is our first episode, we thought what better way to do it than to look back at a year that a Foundation Year 2 doctor might have had for all the new doctors that just started a month ago, and how to achieve excellence really in the path you're doing if that's what you desire. So joining us today, we have a good friend of mine, Dr. Daniel Ahari. Hi, Dan. He's one
Hello,
of the...
Lucrezia. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you? He's one of the academic Foundation Year 2 doctors, and he's currently at Wythenshawe. He came top of his class at University of Manchester and graduated with honours in medicine, as well as getting a first in his anatomical sciences BSc. Now, you'd think with all these accolades, he might be a bit big-headed, but actually, Dr. Ahari is one of the people that I hope to emulate because he is a fantastic doctor and he's always helped everyone that he could possibly help in medical school, myself included. So he's always been a bit of a mentor for me and been able to show me the path throughout medicine. He knew me when I got into medicine, transferring from my original degree. So we go a long way back. So before we begin, what are you drinking today, Daniel?
Oh, I've got my Studio Ghibli mug, not sponsored.
Nice.
And I pretty much to maybe embarrassment, maybe disappointment, I only really drink mochas or mochas, as I found out Canadians call it, when I kept trying to order a mocha in Canada and nobody knew what I was asking for.
Yes.
I only started drinking coffee actually when I started work, because you do kind of need it when you're a doctor. So yeah, mochas for now. That's the sort of only thing that I drink.
Well, to be fair, I get it. With the work thing, I think I had withdrawals about week 3 because we got a nice coffee machine in our doctor's office and we were all just like having coffees constantly. And then I realised I was getting migraines and I was just kind of like, I need to take a step back. But I am still having a caramel latte right now, so it is what it is.
Good. Yeah,
still,
I mean, coffee keeps the hospital moving, to be honest.
It really does.
A bit of a side track, sorry, but I'm the president of our doctor's mess, so I'm responsible
nice.
for stocking everything, and the
Mr.
coffee
President.
obviously goes so quickly. So yeah, it's true. Doctors do love coffee, so it's a great theme for a podcast. So kudos to Aziz for that one.
Yeah, so if anyone wants to help out the hospitals with coffee, let us know. Get a little sponsorship deal in there somewhere. But so looking back, you started as a doctor last August. How was that?
Yeah, no, it's gone fast actually. It has been a year. It's been a year and 2 months now. I think for me as well, my start was maybe a bit unusual. In that my first shift was sort of normal day shift on the Wednesday, Black Wednesday, Grey Wednesday, whatever people call it, and then Friday was my night shift, my first night shift. So my second ever shift as a doctor was a night shift, and that was pretty hard. And I think looking back on it, that was like the worst shift as a doctor.
Really?
Just because you just get thrown into the deep end. Looking back on it now, in reality, realistically, with all this experience I have now, the shift itself was absolutely fine. Wouldn't phase me. I've dealt with so much worse since but
then.
I think
great.
Absolutely. But with the experience of being a doctor for even a few months, it just makes it so much easier. So the stuff that made me sort of upset and really not enjoying the shift when I worked it back on that first night shift is so easy to brush aside, so easy to get over with, working as like a doctor with a year experience behind his back. And when I think about it, my sort of last shift of F1 was actually again doing the same sort of shift. It was doing a surgical night shift. I dealt with 3 emergencies, I would basically say, and I felt absolutely fine. So that was kind of nice actually.
Seeing the growth over there.
So that was pretty good. So yeah.
Did you have to over time? Yeah, did you have to learn along, like obviously in medicine, continuous lifelong learning, we know that's the motto really. But did you notice it just improve with your experiences in hospital, or did you have to go home and read up on things and do the past med that we all know and love to...
I think I mean it's a good question, but I think a lot of the learning, especially in your sort of first year where you're still finding your feet, you get thrown in the deep end, a lot of it is a systems learning. And that's a huge thing, I think, with any job, to be honest, as well. I think maybe with medicine there's a bit more stress associated with it because obviously the implications of mistakes can be bigger.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, I was a medical student in Manchester, but I mostly did my clinical training, my learning on the wards
Mm-hmm.
in Salford Hospital,
Yeah.
and obviously working in Wythenshawe. The system's completely different down to the IT system, and that they didn't have an IT system when I started working. It was all just paper notes.
Oh no, I could never.
Taking bloods, there was a completely different system as well. So that was a big sort of shock. And I think it takes time to get used to that. It takes time
Mm-hmm.
to get used to where everything is and how everything works. And then I guess maybe a month into working, we now got this new IT system, which was super complicated, and again, it took another sort of two months, a month to get used to.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the major learning curve, and I hope I'm not alone in thinking that. I've I've always tried to have a good knowledge base throughout
Mm-hmm.
medical
Yeah, well,
school. Um,
first in your year, I think your knowledge base was better than good, Dan. But yeah, fair enough.
But I think you're always going over your sort of emergency
Mm.
scenarios. You don't want to make any mistakes. You don't want to look like you know nothing either. But actually, as an F1, for the most part, in my experience, you do get your hand held quite a lot, which is
Mm-hmm.
nice. And I think most of the learning curve was associated with that systems learning, like who do I refer to? How do I refer? What
Mm.
do I say when I refer? How do I bleep somebody? How do I answer a bleep? All
Mm.
these different things. And then I think you sort of go back to the medicine once you've found your feet.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, long-winded answer. Sorry, but
No, it's
that's my
absolutely fine.
answer.
That's why we're here. But did you find I'm obviously on psychiatry at the minute, and everyone
Hmm.
keeps warning me, oh, when you return to medicine, it's going to be like a ring of fire. You're going to have to jump through all the hoops again. Did you find switching between your specialties like, did you kind of have that first day feeling again, or was it a bit more manageable because you knew the
No,
system?
no, you definitely do. And loads of people talk about this as well. Actually,
Mm.
that's the issue with rotational training. I think because obviously in the UK, when you're in the foundation program, so the equivalent internationally is sort of your internship years, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
A 4-month placement in cardiology, orthopedics, whatever, is just enough to sort of make you feel comfortable, make you feel
Yeah.
a bit confident, and then you rotate and you sort of lose that. So yeah, I mean, especially with me, I went from a surgical specialty, so orthopedics was my first job, and then I went to
Mm-hmm.
cardiology, a medical specialty. Obviously, they're on completely different sides of the hospital. Everything is done differently down to how the consultant ward round
Mm.
happens. The patients often have a lot more comorbidities versus orthopedic patients, and I
Mm.
think that first day feeling that you mentioned was
Was back.
definitely a feature. It was persistent for a few weeks actually,
Mm.
because you're doing your own calls as well. So within my first few weeks of doing a medical job, I was expected to hold the crash bleep as well. So that just adds that sort of extra element to it. But yeah, I think that's just an issue with rotational training. And I think
Mm-hmm.
obviously when you get more years behind your belt and you've worked as a doctor, you get that confidence. It's always going to be a bit of a hit to the system, but I think you can ride that
Mm-hmm.
wave a bit easier. But I think when you're an F1, when you're junior,
It's just a bit.
it just takes a few weeks to get used to it. So yeah, unfortunately, that would be the case for you, but
Mm-hmm.
you
Great.
will be fine because it happens to everybody.
But so holding the crash bleep though, you still had your seniors. I'm guessing that would come
Oh
with like
yeah,
once it goes off.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I was actually never the first person to respond to a crash bleep. I
Mm.
don't know if that means I'm just like if I'm
Slow.
lucky or if I'm just slow, one of
Slow.
those.
Yeah.
And I was actually quite shocked at how sort of small I perceived the crash team to be. It's
Mm.
usually like a medical registrar, so somebody with minimum like 6 years of working,
Mm.
sort of um, as their background, who leads the arrest team,
Yeah.
and then you have like 4 other doctors probably, but
I
that's
found it.
enough. That's
Yeah,
enough
I
for
found it
everything. Yeah.
incredible though. As a medical student, I
Hmm.
saw one, just by chance on the ward I was working, and
Hmm.
the way everyone just suddenly appeared, like literally they pulled the buzzer like this,
Oh
and then
yeah.
suddenly
Yeah. Yeah.
everyone, and I was there just like, I'm a med student, put me where you
Hmm.
need me, but fourth year,
Yeah.
so. But it's so seamless, and
Hmm.
it's just incredible how everyone just gets stuck in and just knows their roles. And I know they have meetings about it beforehand,
Hmm.
but so when you're holding the bleep, is it more just you have to get there and potentially start compressions or start the
Oh
timer
yeah,
and things
absolutely.
like
I mean,
that? Or is it note take? Like, how does it? I know you said you've never been first, but what is the designated role of the then F1, I guess?
yeah, so you're right. Actually, when you start off in the morning, you sort of have your handover, and everyone will
Mm,
assign roles. And when we do on calls, usually minimum it's 2 days on call, sometimes as many as four, but
mm,
usually two if you're on the crash team. And for the F1, I think it's pretty obvious. Either you're scribing or you're doing the drugs and access. Scribing is actually quite cool because you sort of hold the tempo and you can really take things off the person who's leading the arrest. You can take it off their mind. You can take that responsibility off of them if you sort of
mm,
know what you're doing. So you can tell them when adrenaline is due. You can
mm-hmm.
tell them when a shock is due. Tell them when a pulse check is due. Um, and I think once you've been to enough, you sort of get it down to a T, and it's really useful because then you can sort of do it as second nature, and then you can take the opportunity to look around you, and micromanage to some extent. So, one scenario that sticks out to me was, making sure that there were no patients in the bays around. Sorry,
Oh,
patients in the beds in that same bay where we were dealing with an arrest call.
oh, that's so
Um,
interesting. That's something I've because obviously psychiatry not
mhm.
as often it's physical health matters. Like
Yeah.
it's very rare, knock on wood, that we get an arrest. So what
Mhm.
happens? Does the call get put out and you like evacuate the other patients? You get some
Well,
staff to remove
it will. So the bleep goes off, and for us, it
mm,
just says, cardiac arrest on ward
wherever.
A or ward B or wherever.
Mm,
And to be honest, some of them you do know that they're probably going to be. I don't know,
for
for
real,
want of a better word. Yeah, I mean, for real, because obviously people pull the crash call whenever they're worried about a
hmm
patient, like
which
first
is
and
the way it
foremost.
should
And
be. Yeah.
exactly, nobody should be discouraged from calling a crash call. Um, but some of them will be, okay, you arrive and instantly within like 1 minute, you know that not all of us need to be here. Usually, like a senior house officer, an SHO will sort of stay back and look after the patient, and you can
Mm,
go. Um, but yeah, there's a few wards like the acute medical unit, obviously the cardiac wards, the cardiology wards. Those are most likely going to be
mm,
full on arrests. Um, so yeah, that gets cool, and then essentially, yeah, you just run there. Everybody shows up, and even though the team of doctors is small, if it's during hours, you're going to have a lot of nurses there.
nurses,
You're going to
yeah.
have a lot of HCAs there. You're going to have other doctors on the ward there.
Mm,
You're going to have all these members of the MDT, who sort of know the drill. They'll already have started CPR if it's necessary by the time you get there.
mm,
Somebody will be running to get the equipment. So it does work out quite nicely. But I think as the F1, provided you're not the first one to be there, probably the most useful thing you can do is just make sure you're not needed to do CPR or help
yeah.
maintain the airway or drugs and
Mm,
access, blah blah. Um, Getting the patient's notes is like invaluable as lame a job as that is. So one of the
no,
things that
definitely.
I've always done is I always get a computer up straight away. I log in, I make sure that the patient's most recent bloods are up on there. I make sure that I've read the patient's history so I can answer any questions. And it's all about making the doctor who's leading the arrest making their job as easy as possible.
And also look
Um,
for a DNA CPR just in
yeah.
case.
I mean, you'd
Just,
hope, yeah, you'd hope
just in
that's
case.
already, yeah,
Yeah, you'd
yeah.
hope it's like right in the front, but
Hmm.
just in case. But so
Yeah.
the other patients, sorry, I'm so curious. Do they
Yeah,
get
sorry,
wheeled
yeah.
out? Do they get wheeled
I
out on
mean,
their beds or?
it's usually the HCAs. They try and be as tactful as possible. They'll all the curtains. We make sure that they get closed because
Mm,
nobody should have to see that.
yeah, of
Um,
course. And
so we
also
make
like
sure that
dignity and respect for the patient
yes,
themselves.
yes,
Yeah, of course.
yes. So we make sure the curtains are closed, and then yeah, you sort of just try and get them out the
Mm.
room. Like I said, usually if you're not involved in the ongoing
And yeah, of
situation,
course.
then
It's
then
fun
you'll do that.
because I've always focused on the doctors whenever it's happened, obviously as a
Hmm.
medical student, getting involved out with compressions where I can if
Hmm.
that's what they need me to do. So I've never paid attention to my surroundings. Funny, I've always just been hyper focused on
Hmm.
the patients. That's just something I never considered, but it's a fair point.
Hmm. And you just have to consider how just scary, shocking, worrying, just
Mm,
traumatic even the experience is going to be for
other
people next
people,
door to
yeah,
those patients in that bay. So I think people do a good job, and usually after you leave the crash call, there'll still be some HCAs, some nurses.
just
So healthcare
yeah,
assistants, HCAs,
yeah.
with the patients, and just reassuring them, letting them know things are okay, because it's scary.
I think what stuck with me once is a patient told me, like, this might be your day to day. You're here, your job. This might be normal.
Mhm.
You might have fun at work, which I do sometimes, luckily. But they're like, this is sometimes the worst day of their lives for other people.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's a thing that's, I feel like, in this profession so easy to forget at times, because you
Mhm.
just become so used to the process of being at work. Not the mundanity of it really, but just constantly being in there, constantly it being like your second home.
Mhm.
That it's easy to almost forget that other people will see it as a completely different experience.
No, absolutely. And you still get those moments.
Mm-hmm.
So, I did a job on breast surgery and it was a great job. I was in theatre every single
You
day.
loved it.
It was
Yeah.
really, yeah, it was really good. So I was assisting in cases every day. It was awesome. And obviously the first few weeks of doing that, I was like, oh, this is great. This is amazing. Like,
Mm,
because I want to do surgery. I like being in theatre. And then, yeah, it does become mundane. You do get used to it. But like
mm,
you said, you have to bear in mind what's going through the patient's head as well. And I remember as well, I was in a neurosurgery clinic, and the the patient asked, "Did you keep the tumor? Can I get a picture of it? Can I take it home?" That sort of thing. And
yeah.
the surgeon was like, "Oh no, we don't really do that. We dispose of it, or it goes to histology, or
Mm,
etc. etc." But I mean, it makes total sense. Like for somebody, this is this blob of of matter, whatever you want to call it,
yeah.
however you want to phrase it, represented a lot of anxiety, a lot of trouble. It's something that they've been dealing with for multiple years sometimes,
Yeah.
and to actually have it over and done with, and not even so much as have a souvenir. It's funny, and like I said, like you said, it represents sometimes the worst day in people's lives, and
Yeah.
you do have to bear that in mind. Yeah.
Yeah. And you also, sorry, this is a complete tangent, but you started working when it was like strikes just started happening, wasn't that right?
um,
Had they done industrial action
I
before you started
think
working? Was there one or two episodes
I
of it
think it
maybe?
was March when the strike started.
So there was like a few
I
before.
could be wrong.
Yes, because
Yeah.
I was a student and it was affecting
Hmm.
our learning opportunities and whether we had to go into placement. You're right. So it was before
Hmm.
you started, but it picked up a bit in your year, didn't it?
Yeah, so it was definitely during my second block. It was definitely during
Yeah.
cardiology because I remember I had a night shift, so I actually didn't miss any work because of the
You
strikes.
were on the night shift.
Because I finished my night shift the morning that the strike started, and the guidance is you
You
finish your
need to
night
have a
shift.
day. Yeah.
So, and I distinctly remember because I actually went to the ward to just deal with the ward job, and the consultant was there like 2 hours early, just sat in the
Just to
doctor's
try.
office. Yeah, well, because the
I really
strikes technically
respect that, to
started
be
at
fair.
because the strikes technically started at 6 a.m.
Yeah.
They thought that it meant the night team was going to go home at 6 a.m. So they were there like I guess 3 hours early. 6 a.m. would be 3 hours early for a
Bless
medical
it.
shift.
That's really sweet. That they
Yeah.
actually cared enough to cover it. They're like, yes, it's gonna be there.
So yeah, that was quite funny. But I'll never remember like handing over my bleep to like one of the most senior doctors in the hospital as well, like the F1 bleep. And then she was like, "Oh yeah, I could probably handle that." So
So you were
yeah,
just like,
it
okay,
definitely
cool.
sticks in the mind. So yeah,
Yeah.
starting with the strikes. I mean, you'll be aware, obviously.
Mm,
It's very topical at the moment. What was it? 98% of people voted to strike.
I think
A
so.
ridiculous amount of eligible doctors. So it's obviously a shared feeling by a lot of the workforce.
Mm,
So although I didn't really technically go on strike in those first sort of set of strikes, just because of how it aligned with my days off after night shifts or my 0 days and things, you could definitely feel sort of change in the
in the air
hospital.
almost, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But
No,
I've been out on the
definitely.
picket line of I've more recently, I have missed. I've gone on strike, so I've gone with the picket line and not gone into work. And
Mm,
yeah, I don't know. I think everyone just sees it as something that we just need to do for the sake of our future careers, for the
yeah.
sake of the NHS. Short-term pain for long-term
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 gain.
gain, and we know that mortality, morbidity isn't affected from studies done in other countries. I think New Zealand, I
Mm,
think Korea is maybe one of them or something. So yeah, I think we can do it in good conscience, but I think,
especially because there is, I think, a lot of public hate for the strikes. Sometimes there's not the realization that there is notice about them, so there's cover in place, like they make sure they have minimum safe staffing levels,
oh
and
yeah,
that you
yeah,
can have like the
absolutely.
whole directive if there aren't enough staff in to bring more people in. But I don't know, I also went on strike back in August when we first started, and there was the first strike date for my cohort of F1s. But I found it really hard because I had a real sense of obligation. I felt guilty that I was on strike, even though it is for the bigger picture and for trying to kind of keep the NHS alive and also keep the doctors wanting to work for the NHS. And even patients, they'll tell me like it's the right thing to do, but I found it really hard to actually just go, if that makes sense. I still
No,
find it hard considering
I
all
think
the next
that's,
strikes coming
yeah.
up.
I think that's totally understandable because obviously you've graduated for a job that you've worked really hard to get, and it's been 5 years coming, 6 years coming,
7.
because
Yeah,
after you
7. Yeah.
transferred, yeah. So and for a lot of people even longer.
Mm.
So I think for me it's obviously very different because I'd worked for 6 months, I guess, at that point before we started going on strike. So that was fine. I sort of felt like I paid my dues, etc. But I guess for you, starting and then boom, within 2 weeks,
I
having to
think,
go on
2 or 3
strike.
weeks, something like that.
Yeah, I totally get why it's why you have those sort of feelings. I get why it'd probably be more difficult for a new F1 to strike, especially with the fact that like the vast majority of people are not going to have much in their bank accounts helping to tide them over.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people are going to be in their overdraft. I think a lot of people wouldn't have
Yeah.
worked over summer because they want to enjoy their their
Last
last
summer
summer
without having to
before.
request time
Exactly.
off. Yeah,
So
exactly.
kudos to any F1 who went on strike. I think most of them did in my hospital. I think all of them did in my
Yeah, I
hospital.
think most of mine as well.
But I know a lot of people were a bit worried about that first hit from their pay packet and things. Yeah.
But we're getting through it. So
Yeah. We'll see. I don't know how long it will last, but I think the
honestly,
doctors will come out on top. We'll see.
maybe. Well, you never know, but we'll see what happens. It'll be interesting. But so where are you now at the minute? Because you mentioned you're on breast and you're on cardiology.
Yeah, so I guess to recap, so first job I did was trauma orthopedics, then I did cardiology, and then I did breast surgery. So that was my F1 year. All of these jobs were sort of 4 months each. And then, as you I think you mentioned this at the start, I'm doing what is called the Academic Foundation Program, which you're also doing. It's been renamed the Specialist
Less
Foundation
foundation
Program.
program, yeah,
And
but
I
no one
guess
knows what that is. So
yeah, I know.
I just keep calling myself like, yeah, I'll be like, oh, I'm on the specialist foundation program, and they'll be like,
Yeah,
sorry, what? I'm like,
yeah.
academic foundation program. I'm like, oh, I'm like, yeah.
Exactly. I mean,
Okay, so
I still call it academic or
yeah.
AFP. But I guess to those who are sort of uninitiated, maybe some people listening from other countries, or if you're maybe a more junior medical student, your mileage may vary depending on where you're doing the specialist foundation program. But for the most part, what it does is instead of you having 6 rotations, which are 3 4 month blocks in year one and 3 4 month blocks in year two. One of those 4 month blocks, which is usually a clinical job, whether that's psychiatry, whether that's trauma orthopedics, whether that's even GP,
Mm,
gets swapped out for a 4 month block where traditionally you dedicate it either to research or education or leadership. And there's a variety of things you can do. So if you start with research, which is what I'm doing, people do all sorts. People do lab projects. They go and completely dissociate from clinical medicine, and they go working in a lab with
mm.
pipettes and beakers and all that fun stuff. I don't know. And this is I'm trying to relate. I really can't because I'd never sort of been in that environment. Or you can do something which I guess would be very current. So people are doing a lot of research into AI at the moment, AI in
Mm,
medicine. So I've got a friend who's doing that. Me myself, I'm rather than doing sort of one big project, I'm basically trying to spin a lot of plates. Got a lot of things going on. So a lot of them are audits and quality improvement projects. So just trying to
mhm,
improve the service that we provide. And I'm doing it sort of attached to the breast surgery unit. But also trying to push out case reports and case series and systematic reviews as well. So sort of going up that hierarchy of scientific evidence. So that's what the research job is. And often they will, they'll give you training Sometimes they give you funding to go on conferences or
Mm.
skill sessions. So that's the sort of research side of it.
Mm-hmm.
I'll let you talk about education, but the leadership aspect is one that I guess is a bit more flexible. So I think depending on whichever deanery or foundation trust you're doing it, again, they'll probably sponsor you to do courses in leadership.
Yeah.
They'll want you to be involved in things like induction or improving services as
Like
well,
quality
working in that sort
improvement
of
projects and things like that.
and sort
Yeah.
of working behind the scenes with the sort of hospital admin team as well, to just get things going, get things moving. Because
Mm.
obviously we need leaders and we need administrators with that clinical background as well. So to my understanding, that's what the sort of leadership side of it is. And then
Mm-hmm.
you're doing education, so
I'm
you can
doing
talk about what it's like
education.
for you.
So, well, at least in my trust, we get the 4-month block. Some places in the northwest will get a day a week to do their specialized interest, but ours is 4 months straight. And so next year in F2, I'll be teaching the clinical side in the emergency department. So I'll get to do 4 months as a general thing in the rota and emergency department as a doctor, and then the 4 months after that, I'll be teaching medical students, but also apparently some clinicians and things like that. So it's exciting. I'm currently doing my PG cert to try and prepare for that, which is like a postgraduate certificate in education. So I'm going to university again, just on the side of work, which has been really fun actually. It was quite nice going on. My first class was last week and arriving on campus and just, I don't know, it was really fun feeling like a student again.
Yeah, it's good to get that.
I've only
Get that
stopped for a
student
month.
email for
Student
discounts
email
as well.
for discounts, but I've only been gone for a month, so I don't know if I should have been missing it as much as I did. But it was funny because it's a postgraduate certificate in teaching. I'm pretty sure I was the youngest person in the class. Not to like judge everyone else's ages, but yeah, I was.
Are they sponsoring it for you? Do they pay for any of it for you? Okay,
so they pay for at least definitely the first module, but they mentioned they expected to do the whole postgraduate certification, which I would have done anyway. So I don't know if there's scope for more funding for the other 2 modules, but the first one's definitely funded, which is a really great opportunity because it is quite, well, in my eyes, expensive with the first junior doctor salary. It's like about 900 something pounds for the first module.
Right. Yeah.
So it's quite
that's
nice
just one of the that's one of the perks, isn't it? I suppose they give you the support for that. They'll sponsor it, obviously, and like I said, depending on where you're doing it in the country, they'll give you different perks here and there.
Yeah.
So it's definitely worth looking into if you see yourself having maybe a bit more of a non-traditional career. If you want to go into research, if you want to have more leadership sort of activities associated with your role,
definitely.
and of course if you want to become an educator, if you want to have that experience, and obviously being a doctor, you're teaching every day for the most part, whether that's a medical student or helping inform a patient about decisions or medications, etc. So I think it's a really good option for anybody, and now is the time to start thinking about it. It's not too late if you're a 5th year, but if you're a 4th year, if you're a 3rd year, I think you can start looking into it, start sort of catering your CV, trying to get your portfolio points up there. Probably maybe a little bit too early if you're in 1st or 2nd year, as in you don't need to feel that pressure, but yeah, the sooner the better, I suppose.
Don't feel the pressure, but I think you always used to tell me in 1st and 2nd year, like, Lucrezia, get your honours points now, like, Lucrezia, do these things now. And I was just always like, oh, it's 1st and 2nd year, like, I have time. But it is actually, like, if you have an opportunity to, with, like, a project in your university, like in Manchester, it's called APEP, or PEP. If you have an opportunity to go further with it and get a publication or at least present it, it does make it easier down the line because it still counts. And it means during your clinical years, you don't have to worry about finding somewhere that will accept it as much. Obviously, if you're still in 4th year and you haven't done it, you still have chances to do it. You're not written off or anything. But I think medicine, it's very easy to get caught up in the day-to-day when you're in university that you forget about the bigger picture sometimes. But I had no publications or presentations or anything. It just hadn't worked out for me in medical school. And I still got a place as an academic foundation program student, I guess now, student doctor. No.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they're trying to, I mean, I think the name sort of reflects that, though, from, changing from academic to specialist. They're trying to sort of bring in people from a wider pool of talent, a wider pool of abilities and experiences too. I mean, I just saw this on Twitter like today.
Mm.
Yorkshire and Humber, so they're one of the deaneries. They've
Yeah.
released their sort of applicant profile, what they sort of will use to score people, what criteria they'll use, and like you get points for being on a sports team or having a business, and
Oh,
you know,
that's really
obviously
nice.
teaching. So I think it's a double-edged sword because I think a lot of people look at that and say, oh, they expect us to have a business. They expect us to. I think there's even a section about music and drama, like if you play an instrument or if you directed a concert or something, you know?
Almost feels like UCAS again, to be honest. For
Yeah, I
medical
mean, it
school.
sounds like medical school
Yeah,
applications, yeah.
honestly.
So I think a lot of people might look at that and think, oh, well, if I haven't competed at a national level in a sport, if I haven't, you know, directed a play, if I don't have a business, if I haven't done volunteering, I'm not going to get a job. Well, I think actually they're trying to encourage people to, um, I mean, they're actively trying to encourage people from multiple different backgrounds to sort of apply. It doesn't matter if your research aspect isn't the strongest. If you have a passion for business, they still value you. If you have a passion for the arts, they still value you. So I think that's nice in a way. The major issue I take from it is just how last minute they move the goalposts around.
Oh yeah,
That's the issue.
100%.
Yeah.
Because as
Yeah.
well, even the Northwest Deanery, they're now including journals, which is fine. The interviews aren't for a while, but people have been waiting for them to release the information for a while to begin writing their application.
Yeah.
And I think it came out a few days ago, and the application deadline is the 4th of October. And it's just, people in medicine sometimes are constantly fighting to just get their applications and you want to make it perfect. Obviously, you can't always be perfect, and that's not a thing that you have to be, but you want to like make sure you've gotten it to the ability that you're like, this is what I want to submit and I'm happy.
Yeah.
And not feel like you don't have enough time.
It's a perennial issue. I think this stuff happens every year. It happened to the core surgical trainees with their applications last year. It's happened with the foundation program as well this year. I think they've removed sort of the educational performance measure. They've removed the SJT as well, which I don't think is controversial. Nobody liked that exam.
But I mean, the marking was really, really like just knowing what they wanted was difficult.
Yeah,
but
I think it's wishy-washy.
It's wishy-washy, but because it comes up in later exams in your medical career, I think it's good as like I know it was really bad to have an exam that dictated where you ended up, but more as a mock to be able to just, even if they just let them do it for the experience of doing an SJT style paper without it counting to anything. So you can experience the question and have your brain thinking in that way before getting it in the real exam where it's like a very difficult exam and you're trying to get into your specialty. I think I'm happy to have experienced it. I was not happy in the lead up to it because I felt like I didn't know how to revise, made my anxiety worse, but the actual experience of doing it I think was useful long term.
I completely disagree.
That's allowed. You're allowed to completely disagree. I just think, I don't know. I'll see when I get to specialty applications if I go down that route. Maybe I'll change my tune. But for now I'm thinking at least I got some form of practice with it.
I understand that. I do understand that perspective. I just don't think it should be a factor at any step of the way.
Fine. If you removed it fully, then I agree.
Yeah.
But it's because it's there. I feel like why remove the one opportunity you have to do like the UKFPO like written out paper that they use kind of thing there. And I get specialty training is different, governing bodies and different people writing the exams, but it still just feels like you're removing a thing we had that would help us with it.
I suppose, but we're digressing. But they've removed that.
Yeah.
They've removed a lot of the things that used to matter in your application for the foundation program. So the way it was is that depending on how well you did medical school, depending on if you had any additional degrees, depending on if you had any publications, you'd be given points, and those points would be used to rank you nationally. And they would run it all through a computer, and they would make sure the highest scoring people got their first preferences. And from what I've read now, it seems like they're totally sort of disincentivized.
Yeah.
Is that a word? Disincentivized? Disincentivized? Whichever one it is.
De-incentivized, I'd go. Yeah.
One of those. Anyway, they've removed all incentive. That's a safer way of saying it. They've removed all incentive, I think, to really, really push yourself in medical school and really, get those higher grades. I think a lot of people now, because medical school is stressful, I think they're going to say, well,
what's the
obviously,
point?
if I learn enough to be safe, why should I have to go the extra mile? Which I think is a bad mentality to have to some extent, but I think it's one that's very relatable. And I think it's one that's very understandable. But I think that is going to be the unfortunate outcome of these changes.
Thing is, with the changes, you never know if they'll change it back. This is the guinea pig year.
Yeah, no,
So that's
you
why,
are right. You are
as
right.
the type of person I am, I'd be like, okay, technically it doesn't count now, but you never know. But I get your point. I think as someone, because they said they changed it and removed all the SJT thing due to like to give people more choice in where they ended up, to remove the like anxiety with where you get placed, and I think also like removing SJT, that was such a random variable that you could never really imagine where you'd end up. But as someone that has anxiety at times, not being able to have any kind of say in my future where I end up, apart from ranking it and then hoping for the best, it would be kind of scary. At least if
Yeah,
you
I
know your
mean,
decile, you still have to apply, like put what you wanted at the top that you thought like where you wanted to go. But you could kind of imagine like, okay, if I put this deanery, I might end up mid-range and be able to select get my like mid-range tracks or whatever you ended up putting. Whereas now it's literally just like what happens.
yeah, I think it's a difficult one because there's no perfect system. So,
Mm.
20 years ago, I think the system was you sort of apply to a hospital, you get an interview, and that obviously opens itself up to like a lot of nepotism. It's very old school, but I think most countries probably do use that system. Like I know America does that, the
Mm.
US, I know the US does that. Um, so there's pros and cons there. But with this, yeah, I think it's just removed that incentive to do well. And like you said, from that aspect of inducing anxiety, not being able to know where you're going,
Mm.
makes it so much more difficult to plan for things. Because I mean, I think if you go down the sort of typical foundation program, you find out where you're sort of going to be working and living in. I want to say as late as April, like early April, something like that.
I think so.
Mm-hmm.
It would be early April. Yes.
Yeah.
Obviously, we found out in January, was it, because of
Well,
the
that's
academic?
one of the major
So
perks
we
of
we
doing the
had
academic.
time,
Yeah, yeah. You
but I
find out
think
so
everyone
much
else,
earlier.
yeah, I think they rank it in March, if I'm not
Mm-hmm.
misstepping
Mm-hmm.
here. March, April, and then they find out a few weeks after that. But some people obviously get tracks where they'd get a track but not know which hospital.
Mm-hmm.
And they sometimes found out 2 weeks before they started working,
Yeah,
which is obviously if you have to move city, that's impossible time frame. That's a lot
yeah,
of stress.
yeah. And again,
But
it's just this doesn't change once you've left medical school and you start working. Like, there's
yeah,
always going to be issues with payroll. There's always going to be issues with your rota, and you have to say it's a difficult job. I think arranging all of these moving parts because I think
mm,
like globally the NHS is like the world's fifth largest employer or something.
oh good. I
It's
wasn't aware
like
of that, to be honest.
it could be outdated. Maybe Amazon is up there. I don't know, but like I think off the top of my head, it's like the U.S. Army, the Chinese Army,
Mm,
Walmart, obviously, and then like the NHS is up there somewhere. So this is
mm,
a massive, massive moving machine.
mm.
And sometimes it doesn't even move. Sometimes the gears get all stuck, and people have to go in there and sort it out. So I think mistakes are expected, but to the scale that they sort of happen with rotors with pay, um, I don't know, but it's a conversation.
That's a whole other
Yeah,
conversation.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
But I will say, just quickly going back to the SFP, my
Hmm.
interview feedback that what they really liked was passion. They were just
Yeah.
like, you really seem passionate. And so I
Hmm.
think, obviously, if you have all the extra things they want, fantastic. But if it's something you're considering, just go for it. And if it's something like, just go and put your best foot forward and try your best. Because at the end
Oh
of the
yeah,
day, you never
yeah.
know.
If
Like,
somebody asks me, should I apply? I mean, obviously you have to use your common sense. So if the only way to get an interview is by having, so like, let's take London for instance.
London, yeah, okay,
So yeah,
London.
with London, like you need to have at least one publication because the first sort of way they sort of separate candidates is they will give points just based on publications. They're not going to
Mm,
look at anything else.
mm,
It doesn't matter if you have a PhD. It doesn't matter if you have a million prizes. If you haven't got as many publication points as, I don't know, let's just for the sake of argument say the top 400 people, you're not
you
going to
don't.
progress to the next stage of interview.
Mm,
So fine, if somebody comes to me and says, Dan, I haven't got any points for London, should I still apply? I'm going to say no. But if they want to apply somewhere that uses the sort of open space questions,
holistic.
and has a bit more of a holistic approach in recruitment, then absolutely I'd say go for it. And I if anyone is listening and thinking about applying for the SFP, do your due diligence, and as long as the chance isn't zero, I would apply. Because these days all the interviews are done on Zoom or Teams or whatever. So you literally have nothing to lose, not even the price of a train ticket. So I would 100% go for it. Yeah.
And I will say as well, I wanted Northwest, so I was very happy. But I looked at other regions, and for some of the questions, like some of them you had to fill out all the questions, and some of them are like teamwork, some of them are like what educational things have you done, some of them are like what research things have you done. And I'd considered applying to Scotland second, but they were asking like, what's your greatest like achievement? What research have you done? What teaching have you done? And I just kind of realized my answer for teaching would literally be bog standard, like teaching other medical students, teaching at outreaches, kind of things like that. But like what a lot of students would have done. My research question, like what have you published? What have you presented? I wouldn't have been able to write anything because I didn't have anything. And I was like, why would I write where they can just see like weak answers? Whereas for the Northwest, I could be strong in my answers. I was like, you know what? I'm just going to go for that and put all my bets on the Northwest and just kind of hope for the best.
Yeah,
and it worked
because
out.
That's another element of the application, isn't it? So you've obviously got your portfolio, and different places care about different things. So some of them might take a single best, presentation. So a presentation at an international conference would give you the most points versus a national presentation. Whereas some won't care what the presentation is, just they give you points for how many you've got. So you have that sort of portfolio which looks at loads of different things, and each place values it differently. And then with some of them, you also have the sort of white space questions, which are questions like you said, what's your greatest achievement, 200 words, that sort of thing. And the issue is, which is the same issue as when you're writing your personal statement, you can't change your questions depending on where you're applying to. So you and I, we both only applied to the Northwest because we only wanted to work in sort of the Manchester area. I was able to write about Manchester. My answers were very specific to Manchester, and it was the same for you as well. So that was one thing to consider as well. I think if you're going to be applying for the SFP, you need to be pragmatic. You need to think, okay, realistically, do I have a chance of getting an interview based on the sort of portfolio? And also, are my white space questions going to be strong enough to afford me an interview in two places or just the one? And if so, then eggs all in one basket. Let's just apply to one place.
And I will say, obviously, if you want to just go for it with whatever white space, go for two. But my thing was, I have a strong disbelief in myself, or at least I used to. It's actually getting better with that being a doctor and realize I'm actually decent at what I do. But they sometimes give you the offers back at different times, and I knew I wanted the Northwest. Where if I applied to Scotland as well, and let's say I got Scotland and Scotland came back to me first, I might just have accepted it because I would have been like, don't know if I would get the Northwest, don't know if they liked me, and then not ended up really where I wanted to. Although I love Scotland, great place, I just really wanted to stay in the Northwest. It's home for me in the UK. And so you kind of have to think of all these things, like, can you resist if you get your second choice offer back? Can you resist potentially losing it to wait for your first if you have an interview?
Exactly.
Because
yeah.
you have a certain amount of time to accept the offer, and if you reject it or you don't accept it, you lose it. So you have to have that kind of strong gut, I'd say, to just be like, you know what, this is what I'm doing, locked in. And I just knew that I'd probably panic accept if I didn't get the Northwest first. And that's why I was like, you know what, hedge my bets. So that I have it Northwest. A lot of people told me not to apply actually, just because I didn't have extra points. But you were the one that was like, no, Lucrezia, you've got this. I was like, okay, I've got this. All in, let's go. And it worked out.
Yeah, I think people don't realize that as well. That's another element to it. Again, this could be a separate podcast about the SFP.
Really could.
There's loads of good YouTube videos out there talking about the application process. But I think the number one thing is don't rank a job, which is not what you did. Is don't rank a job unless you actually want it. So me, I was very, very selective with my jobs. I only ranked sort of 5 jobs out of the 60 plus that were available, because I knew that, I had that security of I was top decile, I had a degree, I had a publication, I knew my points were going to be high, so I knew I was going to be in the sort of Manchester area anyway, and I would I looked at the sort of the normal foundation jobs, and there are a lot of good ones on there. So I just sort of thought to myself, if I do the academic foundation program, I would rather it be in a location that I want at a hospital that
Mm.
I want, rather than just doing the SFP or the AFP in a location or a hospital that I didn't really want, just for the sake of having an SFP. So that's again, do your due diligence, be pragmatic, look into it, and just don't rank a job unless you can see yourself doing it.
I
Or
I
if
mean,
you
I
really
tried.
would rather have like an academic job versus a normal foundation job.
I
Yeah,
tried to do my due diligence. Oh my gosh, wow,
it's
tongue
hard to say,
twister.
isn't it?
True.
Yeah,
I tried to do my due diligence, but
nice. Yeah.
because on like normal foundation program you have to rank everything, I just thought
Mhm.
I have to rank everything. So I ranked all 60, I think it was 63 jobs in my year. And
Yeah,
that was fun, like looking at
that
every
was my fault. I should have
location.
told you. I should have told
No,
you.
no, it's I thought I'd read everything, but clearly not.
Yeah.
Luckily, I didn't think like, oh, let me think. Maybe by chance, maybe I'll put this one first because I might be more likely to get it. No, no, no. I luckily ranked my first choice first, and like in order of choices. At least I didn't mess up that bad. And I luckily got my first choice, but yeah, I didn't realize you could just rank a few of them. So I fully
Mhm.
went through all of them. Like,
Yeah.
okay, I was like, sure, I'll take. One of them didn't even have a job associated with it. It was like empty. They just hadn't removed it, and I was like, wonder what happens if I get this. It was my last choice, but I was like, do I get a job if I get this? But I was
Oh.
like, okay, fine.
Well, first
But
of
it
all, it
was
wasn't luck that you got that. Obviously, you did work hard for it.
okay.
But
Thank
yeah,
you.
yeah, always read the little
The
rules,
fine
because you
print,
can,
yeah.
yeah, because you can, especially with the SFP, especially with the process, which again we're not going to go like
Too
into
deep
much more
into.
detail. But read about how jobs are offered, because that can really change the way you sort of apply
You
for it.
apply, yeah,
Yeah,
agreed.
but in summary, yes, apply for the SFP basically. Yeah,
Endorsed by Dr. Daniel Ahari.
yeah, there you go.
But so what's next? I know you're doing your research block now. Then, do you have
Mhm.
any plans for the future at the minute? Do you know what you want to do? I know breast. To be fair, breast surgery. But
Mhm.
other than that, any plans for the big Dr. Daniel Ahari?
So yeah, I mean, I'm obviously what, a month and a half into this academic rotation.
Mm-hmm.
I really want to come away with a few publications, a few presentations, that sort of thing. That's the aim. And that's all sort of working towards a career in surgery. So applications for core surgical training, which is how we do things in the UK. It's a very, very drawn out process. You do your 2 years of foundation training, your 2 year internship,
Mm.
and then you do 2 years of the sort of basic surgical training where you do take up more responsibilities. So you're seeing patients in A&E. You're the first port of call for patients who come into the emergency department, and you're starting to get some time in clinics and time in theatre as well. So that's what I'm applying for, and then after that, obviously, you apply for specialty training in the UK, which is as long as 6 years for surgery before you become a consultant. So when you
Mm.
compare that to America, where I think the path to becoming an attending is, I don't know, I want to say like 4 years out of university. Obviously, med school for them
From
is
his
a
extra.
postgraduate degree. So I think in the grand scheme of things, it does actually balance out. But if you just look at medical training in the US, it's a lot faster than it
I
is
think
in
it's
the
just more
UK.
direct as well. Like you apply
Yeah,
straight from your degree into the
yeah,
job you want, which match
yeah.
day is very stressful from what I
Oh, of
understand
course,
because of
yeah,
it.
yeah.
But it means once you're in, it's just a run through. You're
Hmm.
in, you'll get there as long as
Yeah.
you pass whatever it is you need to pass in America. I'm not
Hmm.
well versed in it.
So I think someone who is sort of 2 years out of medical school in the US, unfortunately, will be doing things that somebody who's like 4 or 5 years out of medical
Mm,
school in the UK is doing, just because of, like you said, how direct, how focused their training is. So that tangent aside, yes, I want to apply for surgery. So I'll be
yeah.
applying for core surgical training in October. Hopefully, if I get an interview, it will be in, I want to say, February, March.
Mm-hmm.
I need to get my portfolio in order, because again, they look at your points. I need to do an exam as well, which is like a multi-specialty recruitment assessment. So questions
The
about
fact that you know
everything
the
and
full name
anything.
impressed. I
Yeah,
always quote
yeah,
the little acronym. I'm like, yeah,
yeah.
sure. MSRA.
I mean, I could be, to be honest, I could be wrong. So, but yeah, I need to sit that and then have my interview, hopefully get a job in a place that I want to have a job in. And then after that, it will be sort of 2 years of that. And then again,
Mm.
applying for surgical training. I'll go down the sort of general surgery route. So breast currently is not its own specialty.
Right. So you're a
I think
general surgeon.
yeah, exactly. So the top dogs in breast surgery, they're always trying to push for breast surgery to be its own specialty. I think after core surgical training, so you go straight into just doing breast, whereas now you sort of do 4 years of surgical training after your core surgical training as a
Right.
general surgeon. So appendices, even gallbladders,
Yeah. Lap
bowel.
choles.
Exactly. You do all of that, and then after about 4 years of being at that level, of being at that registrar level, you can then do breast for 2 years before usually doing like a fellowship and then becoming a consultant. So
Wow.
when you spell it out like that, it is long,
Yeah.
but yeah.
Sounds
One of those
like
things.
medical school applications on steroids. Honestly, I thought that was bad enough, and now.
Yeah.
But if anyone can do it, you can. Like,
Well, fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed, and all of
yeah,
that.
these postgraduate exams are no joke. So I did my MRCS a few weeks ago, which is again membership of the Royal College of Surgeons. So I know this acronym for sure. That's the first exam, and it's a sort of a 6-hour exam essentially, including the 1 hour break, so 5-hour exam, with 300 questions, just single best answer, multiple choice questions. And it was pretty tough actually. I would not be surprised if I failed it. I don't think I took it seriously enough. The pass rate is about a third, so 33% of people pass it. The pass mark is usually high 60s, low 70s. So that was a different ball game. Definitely a step up from medical school, I would say, and it's definitely one you need to take seriously, regardless of how well you've done medical school. So, yeah.
And is it 3 attempts to pass? Like, is there a limit on how many attempts you can?
I don't know. I think it's like 6 attempts, to be fair.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
I think I spoke to a lot of my senior surgeons, my registrars and things, and a lot of them said they failed it first time. So it's not uncommon to do so.
Because you just don't know what to expect, really. I guess.
I mean, I'll take the hit to my ego. I don't care about failing it. What I do care about is the hit to your wallet. So another thing about the UK is that we have to pay for our exams as well.
Oh god, I don't
postgraduate exams.
How much?
So the MRCS was £580 for the privilege of sitting it and most likely failing it. And then that's just the first part. The second part, which is more of like a sort of OSCE Viva style, is over £1,000. So it's a costly journey. I mean, you can get the tax back on it, but
you can, but you have to apply at a certain time, so do not miss that application.
So that helps a tiny bit, but yeah.
Yeah, and bear in mind the average UK junior doctor salary F1 is 32,000. So
yeah,
compared to other countries where they might be getting a bit more, makes it a bit difficult.
Yeah. It's a hefty chunk of your payslip. So,
but you're getting to specialize, isn't that the positive?
Yeah, exactly. It's exciting. I was doing the exam, and when I was learning and revising stuff, I was like, okay, this is pretty cool. Like, I'm getting to go back over the anatomy, which is stuff that I really like.
Which, you enjoyed that. You really did.
Yeah, and sort of look at things in more detail, in more depth, and because obviously medical school is long, is 5 years, but you can't cover every bit about anatomy into extreme detail. And the same thing for this exam. They even say it themselves. So like with specialist anatomy, like ophthalmology, like neurosurgery, like ENT to some extent, like you're not expected to know all of it, but for the emergencies, the sort of stuff you'll be dealing with as that SHO, as that person responding to bleeps, in a surgical context, they cover all the stuff you need to know. So that was really cool, and it was very affirming revising for it. I will just not appreciate having to pay again if I fail, but that's a problem for the future.
Exactly. And I guess you got to kind of see that it worked. That is the specialty you want, which I guess is the silver lining. So yeah. But anyway, thank you so much for talking to me today, Dr. Ahari.
That's all right. Pleasure.
I think that's everything on mine, unless you have any last words you'd like to give the good people, the public.
No, I think again, if you're soon to be start work as a doctor, don't worry about it. Try and enjoy the journey, enjoy the novelty of it. There will be tough times, especially at the start, but what really helped me going through it was just the fact that I know thousands of people do it every year. Why should you be any different? And I think that was something that really reassured me when I did my first night shift, really reassured me when I was dealing with my first emergency and attending my first crash call. 1,000 people do it every year. Why would you be any different? And I think that's one tenet to
That's
sort
a
of
good,
give you a
yeah.
bit of solace. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much.
That's all right.